The drive home felt unusual, calm, almost serene. A last-minute cancellation meant I got to leave work early, something Melanie always encouraged me to do more often. I couldn't help but smile at the thought of surprising her. Thursday was one of her busiest days, with back-to-back music lessons keeping her tied to the piano in the living room. I figured I'd sneak in, maybe bring her some coffee, and catch a glimpse of her in her element. But as I pushed the front door open, I noticed something strange. The house was silent. Normally, the sound of piano keys, stumbling, halting, and restarting, would be echoing down the hallway. She always joked about how hard it was to teach adults who swore they could finally master Beethoven. But today, there was nothing. No music, no voices. Just silence. I set my bag down near the door, listening for any sign of life. "Melanie!" I called, but the house swallowed my voice whole. I moved toward the living room, where the piano stood gleaming by the window. It looked untouched, the bench slightly askew, sheet music scattered across the floor like someone had left in a hurry. My stomach tightened, a quiet tension creeping in as I turned toward the stairs. That's when I saw them, the clothes. Melanie's clothes. Her favorite sweater, the soft gray one I'd bought her for Christmas, lay draped over the banister. A pair of leggings was crumpled a few steps up, like they'd been tossed there carelessly. But it wasn't just her clothes. Mixed in were others, a man's shirt, the fabric rumpled and wrinkled, lying halfway up the staircase. A pair of jeans. A belt, the buckle catching a glint of light from the window. I froze, staring at the disarray. Melanie wasn't careless. She was methodical, always folding her clothes neatly or tossing them directly into the laundry bin. This wasn't her. Not the woman I knew. I climbed the stairs, each step measured, deliberate. My breath was steady, though I could feel the thud of my pulse against my ribs. By the time I reached the landing, my eyes were locked on the bedroom door, slightly ajar. Then I heard it, the sounds coming from inside. First, it was faint, a muffled giggle, low and throaty. Then the rhythm started, soft but unmistakable, the kind of sound that twisted in your gut because there was no other explanation. I stood outside the door, staring at the narrow crack where light spilled through. My fists tightened at my sides, but I didn't push it open. Not yet. This was my home, my marriage, my life. Whatever was happening on the other side of that door wasn't just a betrayal, it was a line being crossed. And I wasn't the type to let that go unchallenged. I stood outside the door, the hallway silent except for the faint rustle of movement inside. My phone felt heavy in my hand, its camera already recording. There was no hesitation now, no doubt about what I was about to do. The door opened silently under my hand, no creak to announce my arrival. Inside, the sight hit me like a blow to the chest. Melanie was in our bed, her body wrapped in the sheets I'd lain in just last night. And beside her, half hidden in the same mess of fabric, was a man. They didn't notice me at first. I stood there in the doorway, my phone capturing every second. It wasn't until I spoke that the moment shattered. "Are you two going to finish up right now?" I said, my voice cold. "Or do you need more time?" They froze. The man's head snapped toward me first, his face going pale. He scrambled to sit up, his eyes wide with fear as he clutched at the sheets like they could shield him. Melanie turned next, her face flushing as she stared at me, her lips parting but no words coming out. I raised my phone slightly. "Don't stop on my account," I said, a bitter edge in my voice. "This is quite the performance." The man stammered, his words tumbling over themselves. I didn't know." "Didn't know she was married?" I interrupted, my tone sharp. "Or didn't think you'd get caught?" He looked down, his hands trembling as he moved to get out of bed. Melanie finally found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. "Please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut her off, my eyes narrowing. "That this is some kind of misunderstanding. That you tripped and fell into this guy? Don't waste my time." I turned my attention back to the man. You. Get out. Now. He hesitated, his gaze darting toward the door, then back at the stairwell. His clothes, the pants, the belt, scattered on the stairs. He'd have to go without them. You heard me, I said, stepping aside to clear the path. Out. The way I found you. He shot a desperate glance at Melanie, but she didn't meet his eyes. He had to go. I followed him to the stairs. Keep moving, I said, my voice low and steady. His shirt was all he managed to grab. By the time he reached the door, I was right behind him. He hesitated, looking back over his shoulder like he wanted to say something. I opened the door wide and gave him a shove onto the porch. Go, I said firmly. And if I ever see you again, you're leaving in a cop car. Got it? He nodded quickly, clutching his shirt like it might somehow save him. He bolted down the driveway, his bare feet slapping against the concrete. I closed the door, the sound of it echoing through the house. For a moment, I just stood there, taking a deep breath. Then I turned back toward the stairs. The house was silent again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Heavier, charged with something I didn't want to name. When I walked back into the bedroom, Melanie was sitting on the edge of the bed, the sheets pulled tight around her like armor. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not one bit. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms as I looked at her. Well, I asked, my voice calm but razor-sharp. What excuse are you going to give me this time? She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Just silence. That's what I thought, I muttered, shaking my head. Let me know when you've got something worth saying. And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving her alone to sit in the wreckage of her choices. I sat on the couch in the living room, the silence of the house pressing down like a weight. The only sound was the faint creak of the stairs as Melanie made her way down. She was slow, hesitant. I didn't need to look to know she was trying to figure out what to say, how to spin what I'd just seen into something forgivable. She stepped into the room, her eyes swollen and red, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. I'm so sorry, she started, her voice trembling. I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything. I didn't respond, just leaned back on the couch and looked at her. I wanted her to feel the weight of my silence, to know that I wasn't buying a single word of her apology. It was stupid, she continued, her voice cracking. I wasn't thinking. I don't even know why it happened. I finally looked up, raising an eyebrow. You don't know why it happened? I repeated, my tone dripping with sarcasm. So what? You tripped, fell into our bed, and he just happened to land on top of you. She winced, tears spilling over as she shook her head. It's not like that, she said, her voice breaking. I stood up slowly, taking my time as I walked toward her. Then what is it like, Melanie? I asked, my voice calm but sharp. Because from where I'm standing, it looks a hell of a lot like you were having the time of your life. She started sobbing, her words coming out in broken fragments. I love you. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, we can work through this. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed in the quiet room. Work through this. I repeated, shaking my head. Melanie, you weren't thinking about working through anything when you brought him into our house. Into our bed. She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back, holding up a hand to stop her. Don't, I said firmly. I don't want your tears, and I definitely don't want your excuses. Without another word, I turned and headed upstairs. She followed, still crying, still begging. Please, she said, her voice desperate. Just let me explain. I'll do anything to make it right. I walked into the bedroom, opened the closet, and grabbed a handful of her clothes. You can start by getting out, I said, tossing the clothes onto the floor. What? She asked, her voice shaky. You heard me, I said, grabbing another pile of clothes and throwing them. Pack your stuff and go. The way I see it, this house belongs to me. Not to you, not to your boyfriend. She stood there, frozen, her hands covering her mouth as I continued to empty the closet. Shirts, pants, dresses. All of it hit the floor in a chaotic heap. You can cry all you want, I said, my tone cold. But if you think for 1 second that I'm going to sit here and listen to you try to justify what you did, you're out of your mind. I don't have anywhere to go, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I turned to face her, crossing my arms. Not my problem, I said flatly. Maybe you can crash at your boyfriend's place. Oh, wait. He doesn't have pants. Might make that awkward. She flinched at my words, her sobs growing louder. Please, she begged. Don't do this. I'll do anything to fix this. I shook my head, letting out a humorless laugh. Fix this? Melanie, you broke it. You don't fix a broken plate by crying over the pieces. You sweep it up and move on. She sank to her knees, clutching the edge of the bed like it might anchor her. Please, she said again, her voice barely a whisper. I grabbed the last pile of clothes from the closet and tossed it onto the growing heap on the floor. Get out, I said, my voice firm. And don't come back. When she didn't move, I leaned against the doorframe. What's the matter? I asked. Too tired from all that rolling around to pack your bags? Her sobs filled the room, but I didn't waver. This was my house, my life, and I wasn't about to let her ruin either of them any further. Fine, I said finally, my voice low. Stay here. Cry your eyes out. But when you're done, you'd better be gone. Because if you're still here when I get back, you won't like what happens next. Without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving her alone with the mess she'd made. For a second, I thought about playing back the video I recorded. Watching it again. Reliving the absolute train wreck I walked in on. But really, what was the point? I'd already seen more than enough. That image of her and him, in my bed, our bed, was already burned into my brain. No matter what I did, it wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. The silence in the house was deafening, broken only by the low hum of the fridge. It was almost funny, really. The same quiet I used to find comforting, peaceful, even, was now unbearable. My gaze landed on the coffee mug sitting on the table. Her mug. A plain white one with a tiny chip near the handle, the one she always used in the mornings. Guess you didn't need caffeine to keep yourself awake tonight, I muttered under my breath, grabbing the mug and heading to the sink. The cold water hit my hand as I rinsed it out, the sharp sound of the water hitting the ceramic cutting through the quiet like a blade. I stood there for a minute, gripping the edge of the counter, staring out the window. The yard was dark, the shadows of the trees swaying gently in the night breeze. My mind wandered, uninvited, to all those stupid little moments we'd shared here. The time she'd laughed at one of my terrible jokes while we cleaned up after dinner. The way she'd pretend to be annoyed when I stole bites of food while she was cooking. The way her hand would brush against mine when she passed me the dishes to dry. Those memories used to feel warm. Like home. Now, they felt like lead weights tied to my chest, dragging me down. Every single one of them felt like a lie, a carefully crafted illusion to cover up whatever she had really been doing behind my back. Then it hit me. A surge of anger, hot and uncontrollable, rising in my chest like a wave. My grip on the counter tightened until my knuckles turned white. My breathing quickened, shallow and uneven. Before I even realized what I was doing, I slammed my fist down on the countertop, hard enough to make the utensils in the nearby drawer rattle. The sound echoed through the house, a hollow reminder of just how empty it felt now. Just like everything else. I leaned against the counter, trying to steady my breathing. But I wasn't about to sit here wallowing. That's not who I am. I've never been the guy to sit around feeling sorry for myself. And I wasn't going to start now. I needed to get out of this house. I couldn't be here tonight. Not in the same space where she betrayed me. I didn't have to go far. My brother lived a few houses down. He was the kind of guy who could read a situation without needing much context. When I knocked on the door, it was late, but he opened it almost immediately. He took one look at my face, and didn't ask a single question. "Spare room?" I asked, my voice flat. "Yeah," he said simply, stepping aside to let me in. I walked in. My brother handed me a beer without saying a word, and for a while, we just sat there in silence. "She cheated," I finally said, breaking the quiet. He nodded slowly, taking a sip of his beer. "Didn't think Melanie had it in her." "Neither did I said with a bitter laugh. "Guess we were both idiots." He didn't say much after that, which was fine by me. Sometimes, just having someone there is enough. That night, I lay in the spare room, staring at the ceiling. The faint sound of traffic outside was a far cry from the suffocating quiet of my house, but it felt better somehow. Cleaner. My mind replayed the night over and over, like a broken record. Her face when I walked in. The sound of her voice. Desperate. Pleading. The smell of another man's cologne still lingering in the air. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to take a deep breath. No. This wasn't going to break me. I'd given her the night to pack her crap and leave. By the time I went back tomorrow, she'd better be gone. If she wasn't, well, let's just say I wasn't going to make it easy for her. For now, though, I let the quiet settle over me. The bed creaked softly as I shifted, grounding me in the present. She might have shattered what we had, but I wasn't about to let her take me down with her. Tomorrow, I'd deal with whatever came next. Tonight, I just needed to rest. As my eyes finally drifted shut, the weight of exhaustion pulling me under, one thought remained crystal clear. This wasn't the end for me. Just the beginning of a new chapter. One without her. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of my brother's spare room, a quiet reminder that life moves forward, whether you're ready for it or not. I stretched out on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling for a moment before I sat up. The reality of the day ahead weighed on me, but it wasn't unbearable. Not anymore. I returned to my home, which was exactly as I had left it. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt hollow rather than peaceful. No lingering scent of her perfume, no sound of her voice echoing through the space. She was gone, and honestly, I didn't care where she went. Her absence wasn't something to grieve. It was a relief. Now it was just walls, furniture, and memories I didn't want anymore. The mess from the night before was still there. It felt like the aftermath of a storm, but at least the storm itself was over. Without wasting any time, I pulled out my phone and called a lawyer. The line rang a few times before a calm, professional voice answered. "I'd like to schedule an appointment to start divorce proceedings," I said, my tone flat and steady. The assistant asked a few questions, and I gave the necessary information. By the time the call ended, a small weight had lifted from my chest. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Next, I called a cleaning service. There was no way I could sit in this house the way it was, not with the lingering reminders of what had happened. "Full deep clean," I told the woman on the other end of the line. "Every room, every corner. As soon as possible." "Of course, sir," she said, her voice polite and efficient. "We can have a team there this afternoon." Perfect. After hanging up, I walked into the living room and sank onto the couch. The quiet was still there, but it felt a little less oppressive now that I was taking steps to reclaim my space. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and my mind wandered to what life used to be like. Before all of this. Before the betrayal. I thought about the mornings I'd wake up without a pit in my stomach, about the weekends spent doing nothing and everything at the same time. We'd watch movies, cook dinners, argue over what music to play while cleaning. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Or so I thought. What the hell was wrong with it? What was so broken that she thought this was the solution? I couldn't understand it. Maybe I never would. The memories kept coming, one after the other, like an unwelcome slideshow in my head. Her smile when we bought this house. The way she'd laugh at the dumb jokes I'd tell while painting the walls. The nights we'd spend dreaming about the future, making plans that now felt meaningless. It wasn't fair. None of it was. When the cleaners arrived that afternoon, I let them in without much explanation. They didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. I just stood there for a moment, watching as they started scrubbing away the dirt, the mess, the reminders of her. It felt symbolic in a way. Like they weren't just cleaning the house, they were cleaning the slate. I headed to the backyard while they worked, letting the fresh air clear my head. The sun was warm, the kind of warmth that makes you feel like maybe, just maybe, things will be okay. As I stood there, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze, I realized something. The life I thought I had with her, it wasn't real. It was an illusion, a picture she'd painted to cover up cracks I didn't even know were there. But now, I had a chance to start over. To build something real. By the time the cleaners finished, the house smelled like lemon and pine instead of betrayal. The air felt lighter, the rooms brighter. It wasn't home yet, but it was a step in the right direction. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking it all in. The memories were still there, lingering like ghosts, but they didn't feel as heavy anymore. There was still a long road ahead. Lawyers, paperwork, conversations I didn't want to have. But for the first time since that night, I felt like I could breathe. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something new. And this time, it would be built on honesty, not lies. For now, though, the silence didn't feel so bad. It felt like freedom. Do you think I made the right choice by leaving? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective means more to me than you might realize.